Today we're looking at reading, highlighting, annotating, and responding to texts. So when we first start reading nonfiction, you should probably use what's called overviewing, which is a form of skimming and scanning the text before reading. So when you do that, you want to focus on the following to overview the text. First of all, see if there's any prior knowledge that you have in the topic. Does anything look familiar to you? You want to note the characteristics of the text length and the structure. What kind of captions do they have? Are there pictures there? How long is the text? Is it split up into chapters? You also want to note important headings and subheadings. Are there certain topics that are being discussed in certain areas of the text? Determine what to read and in what order. Sometimes in nonfiction, sometimes it's better just to go ahead and read from beginning to end. Sometimes, since you're activating prior knowledge, maybe perhaps read the topic that you know first according to the subheadings and then go back and get to the rest. And then, of course, determine what to pay careful attention to. And that will lead us to our next piece. And that's highlighting. Now, to effectively highlight text, you need to be able to read through the text and to think about it as you're reading through it, because we need to make conscious decisions about what we need to remember and learn. Since you can't possibly remember everything, you're going to need to sort through the important information. And once you do that, you're going to be picking out main ideas, and those are the things you want to highlight. It's nice to notice the supporting details, but you need to let those go. You don't want to highlight everything. So how do I properly highlight? Well, we can use the following guidelines. Look carefully at the first and last line of each paragraph. Usually important information like a topic heading or some sort of thesis might be contained there. Highlight only the necessary words and phrases that gives you enough of a sense to go back and review. Don't highlight an entire sentence. Don't get thrown off by interesting details. Although this might be a fascinating topic to you, it might often obscure the important information you should be highlighting. And then, of course, make notes in the margin to emphasize a very important highlighted word or phrase. If you've highlighted a bit, but there's something that is extremely important, you're going to want to highlight it, and you're also going to want to make a note near it. What you're looking for in particular for highlighting is cue words. They're almost always followed by important information. Certain transitions are going to start giving you topics. Pay attention to the vast array of nonfiction features that signal this importance. Again, you're looking for subheadings and headings, maybe captions underneath pictures. A lot of nonfiction features that don't particularly go in with fiction are a lot of times going to signal the importance of highlighting areas. Now, pay attention to surprising information. It might mean that you're learning something new. And then, of course, when finished, check to see that no more than half the paragraph is highlighted. Otherwise, what was the point of highlighting? Now, as readers become more adept, usually about 1/3 of the paragraph is a good measure for highlighting. Well, how do we know what context clues we need to look for in order to highlight? Well, when a word is italicized, a paragraph begins with a boldface heading, or the text says most important. Usually they're about to give you that topic sentence or that main heading. So that's probably something you might want to highlight. Titles, headings, frame text, captions, those are also things that you probably want to highlight as well because they help focus readers as they sort through the important information from the less important details. Now, a photograph and a caption sometimes synthesize the most important information on the page, rendering a complete reading of the text unnecessary. Sometimes in nonfiction texts, because the editor wants to highlight a very important piece of information, not only do they talk about it, they will give a picture or a graph and caption it. So that tells you the editor thought that was important, so it's likely you want to find it important as well. Speaking of illustrations and photographs, they usually play a prominent role in nonfiction in order to enhance reading comprehension. You're going to find quite a few illustrations and photographs in nonfiction trade books, in academic books, in magazines, online. They usually capture readers because of their colorfulness and they carry them deeper into a meaning. Graphics as well. All of them count. Diagrams, cutaways, cross-sections, overlays, distribution maps, word bubbles, tables, graphs, charts. All of these things graphically inform nonfiction readers of important information. And usually they have a caption underneath these graphics to help you understand what it is you're looking at. That is certainly something that you would know is an important topic. And then, of course, text organizers in nonfiction, like an index, a preface, table of contents, glossary, and appendix. Those are also very important topics. They're important enough for the editor to put them in those text organizers. So you're going to want to make sure you know those are the important pieces of information to highlight. Usually nonfiction features are user-friendly. A lot of times you'll see the fonts and effects, especially online. Titles, headings, boldface print. A lot of times you see color prints, italics, bullets, captions, labels. Usually those are going to help signal an importance in text. So you're going to notice a lot of times your titles and your headings, they've got a lot of white space around them. They're going to be in boldface print. A lot of times that gives you the idea of what the editor thought was important. And then, of course, watch out for your transitions, your cue words, and your phrases. Nonfiction writing often includes text cues that signal importance. Signal words like stop signs warn readers to halt and pay attention. A lot of these transitional words would be, for example, for instance, in fact, in conclusion, most important, but, therefore, on the other hand, and such as. If you find a lot of these transitional phrases, you're probably going to see important information coming directly after them. So when we start annotating and we start looking at how do we put notes down in our nonfiction texts, a lot of times people will use what are called metacognitive markers. That way you can kind of come back and take a look at your notes and easily figure out what parts are which. For example, if you were looking for a main idea in a topic or main idea in a heading or a subheading through several paragraphs, you might want to label them MI. If you're finding important vocabulary, and a lot of times in nonfiction, they will go ahead and boldface print or they'll italicize vocabulary, but maybe not all vocabularies had that, so you might want to put an IV next to your important vocabulary that you might not know the meanings of. There might be some things you have more questions about, and you might want to go and ask your advisor or your teacher or your manager about something, and so put a couple of question marks by it. Are you confused by something, or does the text leave you questioning? You might want to have some question marks nearby. Key details, probably you've highlighted quite a few of these, but maybe perhaps some are more important than others. You might want to do a KD next to it. Those are going to be pieces of evidence, maybe perhaps quotes that are given in the text that support your main idea. So maybe you've got an MI in one of several paragraphs, but you might have key details throughout every paragraph that supports your main idea. Now, a lot of times you might also see repeated words and ideas. Maybe perhaps you're reading something with an argument or an analysis in it. So if you see the repeated words just showing up over and over again, perhaps your author or editor is thinking that these are important. So you might want to put an RW next to it. If there's something that is just plain interesting or something you want to look into more, this kind of surprise or aha moment, perhaps you want to put a couple of exclamation points by it because you're intrigued. You'd like to learn more information about it. It's not so much you have a question because you're confused, but you'd like to learn more or you'd like to discuss, or there's something that you found absolutely interesting. So now that we have our metacognitive markers, how do we annotate? Well, highlighting and underlining alone is not annotation because you've said, well, this passage is important. But now we need to know why. Why is it important? Now, annotating does take a long time. It makes you a bit of a slower reader, but it's a more conscientious read. Ultimately, it's also a more sophisticated one because you're going to evolve to a point that it's going to actually be a little awkward for you to read without annotating. You're responding to the text when you annotate, so it is going to take a bit more time, but because you're responding to the text, you are learning and you are actively engaging in that topic. Now, the question I'm often asked by students is, well, how much annotating is enough? It's kind of like asking how long an essay needs to be. It's probably vague and an irritating answer, but It's as much or as long as it needs to be. It's nice to see a lot of annotations in a text, but when I take a look at a lot of what my students are annotating, I'm looking at quality and I'm looking at thought behind the actual annotations. So you're looking for annotations that help you learn, that help you engage in the text. It looks like you're discussing the text. It looks like you're trying to figure out more of the text. It looks like maybe perhaps you're confused by the text and you're asking questions of it. That's what annotation is supposed to do. You're actively engaging in the topic. And then lastly, now once we start getting all of our annotation and highlights, we need to start summarizing and paraphrasing, because now you're taking the information and you're putting it into your own words. It's now becoming your information. And I know it kind of seems basic, but it can actually be really helpful when you're going back through a text to remember and locate where something happened. So you might want to jot down in the margins keywords or phrases that simply summarize or paraphrase what just happened, because if you see a phrase or two in your own words, that's going to give you that light bulb moment and go, aha, I remember what this paragraph is on. Now, for those of you who are mathematically inclined, how much should I annotate? Probably only about 20% total annotating of your text. Summarizing and paraphrasing should not dominate your notes. Remember, you're trying to summarize here. You're trying to say in as little words as possible and in your own words what is happening in the text. So finally, once you've summarized and paraphrased, now comes your personal reactions and any questions you might have. So don't underestimate the importance of this type of engagement with the text. If something you read strikes you as funny, is intense, maybe perhaps it's confusing, maybe you've been enlightened and you'd like to learn more, feel free to honor those reactions. Record them in the margins. It is okay. It's not only perfectly acceptable, but it indicates you're paying attention and engaging with the text. It's almost like you're talking to the text. Now, if you have specific questions about what you're reading, you might actually want to physically write that question down. After all, if it's confusing, you probably want to research more information by either asking a more expert reader, maybe perhaps Googling, or doing some other way to kind of research your question. Now, if what you read reminds you of something else, whether or not it's another text you've read, maybe perhaps a movie you saw, something you heard once, maybe it's like a person you know, if you have some sort of connection to that piece of information or the people or events that are in there, record your reaction. This is just further evidence of your connection and internalization of the text. Furthermore, connecting and comparing and contrasting texts is actually an important skill, one that will be valuable to you in college, where your professors expect you to be able to connect and compare and contrast several different texts and to draw from your previous experience and your knowledge. All right, so what are we looking at overall? How do we take specific notes on nonfiction? Well, how does the writer present the argument and prove it? Think about the writer's argument and tone. Analyze the diction, the word choice of the author, and the syntax, their word order, used to express their point of view. Take a look at their sentence structures. Consider their purpose. Are they trying to explain? Are they trying to persuade, to describe, to entertain, to editorialize? What is it that the writer is doing? Put your questions down and define any unknown terms. Be aware of rhetorical devices and examine their effectiveness. There might be bias. Also, consider any logical fallacies, such as bad logic or just plain wrong thinking, in the author's arguments. Be aware of these logical fallacies and record your personal reactions and questions. Well, that's how you highlight, annotate, and summarize and paraphrase so you can take good notes with your nonfiction. If you like what you see, it'd be great if you left me a like. I'd also like to hear more from you. If you have any other specific questions, you have the comments section. Thanks for stopping by.